I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions, and I'd love it if we could have some questions from the floor, especially because we didn't get a chance to do that after the presentation. So I'm just going to ask a few little things, and then we'll get going. I don't know what question. Should I just stand here? Okay. I'll do it. It's all good. I've been practicing. So Luke, I wanted to ask you the first question. We talked a lot about retention and once women are in with organizations, how do we keep them, how do we listen to them, how do we promote them. Dean touched on recruitment a little bit. I would love to know more specifically, considering that the feedback is how do you find and retain, how do you find women in these roles.
Yes.
What's working from what you're seeing? What's working and what's not working in terms of diversity recruitment?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Lindsey. Thanks for having me along. It's again really good to be here and be amongst all of you. Everyone's extremely valuable in this sort of space. But look, in terms of what's working, what's not, it's really good to hear Bridget and Dean's perspective of what's going on inside. Obviously, as an independent recruitment and HR services firm at the moment, we work and partner with clients, but we are on the outer of the industry as a whole. I did have a bit of time in industry as well with Oricon from a consultant perspective as well. So it's nice to have that sort of viewpoint. But there's some really good things going on. Operationally, more from what you were saying, Dean, and I'll relate a little bit more to Dean because of being in that private sector. Operationally, from a screening, a selection process, and real good change in shifts happening around the way we interview, around things like you say, the evolution of language, getting rid of unconscious but also conscious bias, legacy bias from things like job descriptions, KPIs, selection criteria. Some of these things haven't been touched for 10, 15, 20 years. These sort of things are being upgraded, refined, improved. But the thing that's not going well, and what we hear from candidates, clients alike, is what both Bridget and Dean have touched on as well, is the transparency and the sincerity of the message that's being sold. And then again, that then knocks onto retention, for example, as well. A lot of people going through a full recruitment process. They can go on for 10, 20 years. You're engaged at some point. You might be engaged at university, you might be engaged upon an interview, maybe as a talent pool you might be engaged. So you want to talk to them, but people are dropping off because the message that they're trying to sell around gender diversity isn't necessarily accurate of what's on the inside. So that's probably the biggest challenge, and where organisations seem to be dropping the ball, and the sort of gripes that we're encountering. But operationally, again, selection processes are improving, so there's positive news, absolutely.
Well, what types of words make a difference? I mean, if you're talking about differentiators, and Dean, I'm curious to your thoughts on this as well. When you're talking about changing PAs, what are the types of changes in PAs that actually matter?
A lot.
Look, I mean, one of the things we've done, and we've been far more, rather than just assuming people understand a role, someone can apply who's in a part-time or a flexible arrangement. We sort of explicitly state that this role could be, we have an approach to flexibility, and that can be done. So we're sort of being more explicit around things rather than assuming someone reads and thinks and knows that. So that's what we've carefully thought through. Sort of what is our I guess what are the options for people, and be clear around that. So the other thing we're backing it up with, which I forgot to mention, is in recruitment, is where in some areas we have a GHD, a women in GHD community, and so we do, and that group are actually backing up and encouraging. So there's sort of things get put out to all of our people, but then there's other things that sort of happen in the background, which is actually not by direction. It's actually taken its own course in doing that. But I know that has actually meant people are applying that maybe wouldn't have before, and it's actually getting more women on our applications and ultimately on our shortlist. Another thing also that came out of those workshops was greater accountability on us having diverse shortlists, and actually ensuring that we do have that, and if we don't, that we have to actually report back on why, and be more accountable about that.
Absolutely, and the flip side of those sort of scenarios, you've probably seen it as well, Dean, is, and I know you mentioned it in one of your flyers or your notes prior to tonight's event, is that word tokenism as well. You know, there's organisations now that have evolved and taken this sort of stuff forward, and it's great, but there's now thoughts from shortlists that it's being done for the sake of it. So how does the terminology, how does the approach, how does the interaction demonstrate what you really feel, what these organisations are really feeling, what is the value proposition for this? Because, yeah, there's you can lose the engagement of the candidates pretty quickly.
I'd love to take this over to Lucia now. So Lucia, I mean, we've seen a huge increase in women in the executive across the industry. Obviously, with all the company jobs, we're in across all significantly in terms of perspective around the fear of that, and how do we manage that fear with the various businesses, and how do we make those executive roles, how do we build on the success in order to have more women really thriving in those seats?
It's really interesting what happens with women when you find them, and when you go looking, what you find. You know, all you have to do is ask the question and give a recruiter and say, I want a 50-50 long list, I want a 50-50 short list, and you know, it's amazing the talent that is there if you ask and go looking. And you know, it can be that simple. Look, I've started thinking that diversity, I'm now starting to think of diversity as a lead indicator for organisational culture. And if you walk into an organisation that has, you know, a real lack of whether it's gender, age, flexibility, racial diversity, you're looking at an organisation that probably needs the lid taken off it. And you know, that culture needs a lot more attention. So, you know, we focus on it, but we focus on it for the business reason, and so that's why I've started thinking about it as a lead indicator for organisational culture and performance, and that's where my thinking is at the moment. And I think with, you know, on the question of recruitment, as well as the language and talking about flexibility, I think we've also got to think more broadly about what really are the core skills that we need in our people. And the whole leadership model and what it takes to succeed, I think we've evolved in that. And that's why I'm reasonably optimistic about, you know, yes, it's been a slow slog till now, but I don't think it's going to take 50 years to get to the next bit, because I think leadership, the whole leadership paradigm has changed. We've moved away from command and control as being, you know, the successful even in the military. We have leadership, which is all about empowering people and trusting them and giving them the tools to make the right decisions at the point at which that decision needs to be made. And that's a very different leadership model. So, you know, they're the kinds of things that I'm thinking about now. Is you know, it's a proxy for organisational culture, which then leads to performance.
We have a fantastically skilled panel here. Please ask a question. Anybody have a question that they'd like to put? Yes, one. Quick. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the presentations. They're quite insightful. I've got a few reflections, and just reading this with the lines of what Bridget said earlier about our industry being quite heavy engineering, and perhaps the lack of representation from females in that sector. So I guess the question I've got is, part of the solution expanding our skill set in our industry as well. I just happen to be from a marketing background. I've been in the industry for about 10 years. I work at Dell, and we've recruited somebody in our team that actually has a psychology background. And the reason why I mention that is because she's got a science background as well. But she's been really good in terms of improving the culture within our team, as one example. But she actually, she's been quite insightful in terms of who we're targeting our services as well, our end users. So I just wanted to throw that out there and just ask a question about, is part of the solution about the skills that we're bringing to the industry, and will that help in terms of gender equality?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I've seen a real shift as well, because I've moved from a metropolitan water authority now to a regional one, and the skill difference and the focus of the skill base and how that needs to evolve is really key, particularly to attracting new candidates just to a regional place. So I think if roles can be focused more on, I think as I agree with the team, more on that leadership, what can you bring from a leadership perspective, and whether you've got an engineering degree or not, the role is there to facilitate the success of others, I see, as a leader, and you don't need to be a technical expert to do that. You need to rely on the skills of others, but you yourself, you can learn that, but you don't have to be the expert. And I think there are some roles that you need the experts and others that you may not, and they can work together. So I totally agree. If you, people in general can broaden out their skill sets, and that's one thing I've done, is gone back and done some law studies, which has been a real eye-opener, and changed my perception and what I can offer. But then as recruiters and, you know, as executives, what can we look for? What else can we look for in people beyond an engineering degree is super key.
Great. Dan Spackman, the ACT branch president. Thanks for having us today. Thanks for your presentation. Just an observation of the two presentations from Bridget and Dean. My observation is we're focusing on demand. So I think you've outlined pretty compelling cases as to the benefits of gender diversity and the benefits that can bring organisations. In the ACT, a challenge we have is supply generally of resources, but particularly of female candidates. And my organisation, like everyone else's, is trying to improve our gender diversity. And one of the things we come up against is actually having quality female candidates at a ground level, right to a graduate level, and all the way through to stick their hands up. And I think the challenge is grassroots right down to schoolgirls selecting a career in the water industry to be part of that organic growth, to Bridget, to avoid that situation where we do all this good work and then it all falls over because we haven't got a sustainable plan in place. Yep. So my question to the panel is, what can we do to improve supply?
Can I just build on that? Is this supply out there? I mean, you know what's out there. I mean, I think there is this sense that there is this scarcity of female candidates. Is that real?
Yes and no. I think if you look at the raw figures and the figures that have been quoted tonight, absolutely, especially in times of demand, like we're experiencing in Victoria at the moment. But I think at the same time, things like expanding on position descriptions, on key criteria, that it's being proven at the moment as a successful means to opening up the talent pool. Things like that are actively working, but the raw supply, as you say, needs to be addressed at grassroots level. So I think, you know, if I look at it selfishly from a recruitment and a talent attraction perspective, what do you have to do gender diversity recruitment? Well, you need to engage with the audience at full stages of the recruitment life cycle, which means upfront, grassroots, school, universities, when they're not looking for work, when they are looking for work, and then perhaps once you've interacted with them. So anyone that's worked for you and moved on, alumni, for example, alumni, people that are talent pools, people you've interviewed that they didn't join you at one point, where are they now? This full sort of cycle of interaction that can carry on all the time in the background will improve your odds, but does it address all supply? There's probably still issues there, especially in regional areas as well.
Bridget, as a woman who studied in the STEM fields, you know, what's your feeling around kind of what encouraging other women to take the pathway that you chose?
Yeah, so that's part of the program that was developed at South East Water, and we hooked up with some Monash University students and actively went out there, and I found that they were super interested. What I couldn't offer them then was a tangible link from saying, hey, this is a great career, but then what can we offer you as a placement? Or you go back into the business and it's like, well, who has the capacity or time to take on a work experience student? Everyone kind of, you know, starts to look around. It's a great idea, but in theory, people have to be able to have the time to create the space to be able to think of the project, to be able to then guide the student through a project, and they become a valuable asset and they can then spruik of the benefits. So that's one, the university track. Noble Park Secondary College is one school that South East Water partnered with to create an ongoing partnership, and South East Water approached the school and they said that has never happened before. We don't get businesses coming to us and saying, can we help you? And they were chosen because, well, there was a number of schools chosen, but they responded. But they were a lower socio-economic school as well. And we had 2 work experience students come, and one, and initially I think she wanted to become a nuclear scientist or something. I'm like, whoa. But then by the end of the week, she was saying, I want to become a chemical engineer. So we're like, well, that's awesome. You know, work is done.
The brainwashing works.
So it's going out and seeking out those partnerships for schools. I mean, some will just won't be interested or can't have the capacity, but others will be super grateful. And I think it's making sure that we spend the time and make the space and have resourcing and funding to enable that where possible.
2 more quick questions, and then I'm going to...
Can I add to that? Dan, you mentioned people aren't putting up their hand. And I think, you know, there are certain things that you want to achieve where you can't wait for it to come to, for it to be chance related, like who will see the ad and who will put up their hand. And I think there's a real role for going out and looking, and if a role is really important to you, you know, you go out and pluck people from places and be a bit proactive. So I just want to add that into the recruitment. It's about tapping people on the shoulder and telling them they're ready, sometimes, as an idea.
I also on that, and it's a great question, and I think there's 2, and I've got 2 answers that are probably contradictory. I actually think the supply is often put up as an excuse. So we've got to knock it back a lot of times. It's often the first reaction I hear in our business, and you've got to challenge it and push it back. So it is often an excuse. However, having said that, there are certain areas, and we need technical people that are skilled and experienced and qualified in certain areas. There is a supply issue. So I'll sort of say a bit of both in that, and that's where I think we as an industry need to do more. Ultimately, get back into at school level and STEM subjects and really feeding. And it actually is a long-term thing. So we've got to bat back on the challenges and push back and push hard and answer what we can do. But equally, I think as an industry, we all have a role to play in actually promoting and getting more girls doing maths and science and feeding into those technical areas. I think that we all have a role to play in that. Whatever sort of business, individually, and we've really got to. The only way we'll change that is collectively doing that, each doing our bit.
If I can weigh in just from an AWA perspective, I remember when we made our commitment to panel parity, there was only sort of one question about it we raised at committee, and I was like, yeah, but what if we can't find a woman? And I was sort of pushed back and said, well, you're going to tell me there's any given subject in our industry on which you cannot find me 2 qualified women to speak. Remember why?
Yeah.
Look harder is the question. Look harder. They're there. Yes, that's very bad.
What have you observed or heard about from other industries that you haven't yet seen applied to engineering or water that excites you?
Awesome question. We need some think time.
Anybody?
Nothing? Nothing yet?
I reckon the issues are really common, across a whole lot of sectors. And they're even really common across sectors where the workforce is largely female. They have similar problems. And I think some of the implementation issues, they are deeply societal. And the reason why I'm optimistic is that, I think even societally we're changing. In views of gender roles at home and in our definitions of leadership. So I think we've got a wave, and I think it's going to create its own momentum.
Well, one activity that I've read about in my sort of study of gender diversity, which is a very loose one, I must say, was around again improving sort of the odds of female candidates and female appointments. Was actually in businesses where they just didn't wait for people to put their hand up. They just took all of the people at a certain level in the business and considered them all as candidates. Yeah. And that vastly improved the number of females who were represented in appointments.
I think they'll do that. That's the thing that they'll have you opt out. So if there's a position coming, there's people that don't want to go for that opt out of it. Otherwise, the entire pool is potentially at a particular level. A candidate may
suppose I want to comment and ask a question of the panel. I run a bunch of scientists. I'm really pleased that I have a pretty good 50-50, and as of Monday this week, I think I now have probably 53-47 female to male across the balance. And I think what I'm seeing in the science disciplines, I'm seeing no problem with supply. There is no supply problem. Some of my colleagues a little bit further down the corridor in engineering land, I just don't know what's going on there because it's very stale, male and pale. And I'm sort of, well, what gives? And I take the point too about, you've got to foster people when they're young. We have university students, scholarship students coming through, and I'm taking two. And sometimes you just need to say, I'm taking them, right? I don't know how I'm going to find the time for them.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to find the money to pay them or where they're going to sit, but you just do it. So Gabby and Olivia are coming in, and that'll probably get me to something like 58, 42, which is really good. One of the things I see with gender diversity in a team, it's just more fun. Like, it's just a better place to work. It's more interesting. It's more dynamic. With any sort of team, when you get a lack of diversity, everybody falls in a group thing, or people can fall in a group thing. And I just really enjoy working with a diverse bunch of people. So my question to the panel is, what can I tell my mates in engineering about trying to get a better balance and trying to do a better job?
Yeah, go for it.
Just do it.
Yeah, I think so. But I think, again, touching on Dean's point as well, is that it's a long-term strategy, a long-term journey that this whole evolution of gender diversity and pay parity is on, and in I guess general terms, we're at the beginning, and the way that organisations are setting up their approaches and their policies and their procedures and their strategies to gender diversity are probably still in their infancy, and that messaging has got to be so consistent over such a long period of time to really generate a brand in the marketplace that's going to be bought into. It's a slow burn. I mean, there's big steps being taken, but I think it's all about the messaging and the reinforcement over time and consistency. There's a lot of peaks and troughs. Yourself and so I think keeping the messaging consistent, true, honest, whether it's good or bad, it's a game of messaging. I think engagement over the longer period of time to start seeing the winners. They've got to commit to it. They've got to commit to it in such a period of time.
I was just going to say, I was just thinking back on my whole recruitment process of recent times and why I decided to move, and I think I was just ready for a change. That was number one, but I just felt I didn't want to regret having a missed opportunity, and even though I wasn't sure that I knew I could do the job, but you always doubt yourself. And I think as women, we're terrible at backing ourselves. And I've seen that in countless women. I had a previous staff member in my previous role who was, you could look at her and she'd fall over. She was that lacking in confidence. It was a real issue that women need to address themselves as well. So yeah, it's. But anyway, I'm glad I moved, and it's given me it's given me just a whole new outlook on what I'm capable of, and I think that's women have got to back themselves to say, yes, I can do this, instead of, oh gee, should I even apply, or what will my husband think, or it's sometimes you've just got to say, this is right for me, and if it's right for me, it's right for my whole family, because I'm a better person. I'm not a grumpy whatever. So it's recruitment is challenging, but confidence for women is a real key.
I want to go back to the question though of what to advise that group of engineers, and I think the thing about a tight team and why teams work is that they trust each other to deliver what needs to be delivered, and so until if you can just get them to think about, well, what is it that they've got to do, and what's so scary about changing the mix of their team, and can they just start thinking about other ways that they might be able to just the value of new ideas and be honest with themselves about why they trust each other and why they mightn't trust somebody else, and get them to work from that. Because anything at work, you really do have to trust everybody else to deliver with you, or you all fail. And I think that's an important element to not forget as we go striving optimistically for change. It's that trusting each other is a really important part of it. So maybe get them to focus on that first.
Dean, I'll use the last word. You bring a whole bunch of engineers, probably even more than Lance has made there. What do you tell your groups of
Not just
engineers?
engineers. Oh, look, I just think, what I've seen in our business, like success, people see it, and sometimes it takes long. So I think you've got to really highlight what works in your team and share that. And people ultimately are not silly, and they actually see, and they're onto a good thing here, and they're doing some good stuff. And what's their secret? What can I do? And that's what I've seen in our business. It spreads, and it's still got some spreading to go. But the pockets of sort of an older school thinking of how you do things, more conservative approach, are changing, and it's by people observing. So I think you've got to, I think your action is just get on and do it, and that you keep doing what you're doing, but be bold in sharing what you're doing so others see it and take inspiration from it. And that's, I think, which we all need to do.
Please join me in thanking our speakers and panelists.